Hello, students. Good morning, everyone. And today we will be starting the class to learn about non-linear narrative. Last week we studied about linear narrative um, in story, and today we are going to learn about non-linear narrative. So basically, non-linear narrative is the opposite of linear narrative, narrative or a story, which is not non-linear. I mean, not a linear narrative, right? For example, in a linear narrative, the chronological, the story happens in a chronological order. In a linear narrative, the story takes place in a chronological order, right? The um, incidents or whatever it's happening in the story comes after one, after the other, another. First, whatever it's happening, next, after that, whatever it's happening in that order. In a non-linear narrative, events are not portrayed in a chronological order. It is out of chronological order. Okay. So an event which is happening later in the story, okay, it can be shown before, or an event which has happened before can be shown later, can be told later. So it does not follow the chronological order. As I told you in the last class, please remember this term chronology or chronological, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a chronological order. 2 comes after 1, 3 comes after 2. Okay. But in non-linear narrative, if I say like 7, 6, 4, 9, 2, 1, 10, this is a non-linear narrative. I am not following the chronological order. So in a non-linear narrative story, we can tell a story in the way which does not follow a chronological order, which does not follow the direct causality patterns of the event featured. How the event have happened, we does not tell the story like that. Okay, we have a lot of parallel distinctive plot lines, means 2 3 stories we are telling together. Okay, we can talk about another narrative inside the main story. So there is a main story, there is a sub story, there is a small story inside the main story. We can talk about that. All right, so we can talk about flashbacks, we can talk about dream immersions or dreams. A character have seen a dream, so we can talk about that in non-linear narrative. So any kind of stories which does not follow the chronological order or the linear storyline is basically called non-linear story. So films, if we see a film in non-linear narrative, we might see an extensive use of flashbacks or flash forwards. Something has happened later, you are bringing it and you are showing it in before it, the story is starting from that. Okay, in a linear storyline. So or something have happened before, you can you are telling it now. So whatever the story is, inside the story, we do not follow any sequence of events. For example, sequence of events mean I have gotten up in the morning, then I am recording this video, then I am sending this video to the class. Then after the video ends, the students have come online, then I am taking an online class. This is a linear storyline, right? This is a linear narrative. This we have studied last week. Non-linear narrative is I have taken a live class today, but after the students have seen the video, so the students saw the video, then I came for the live class. Okay, because it in the morning I woke up late, so I have sent the video, and after that I have taken a live class. So the way I have told you, it is not following how the event have happened. In the linear storyline, I told you, first, I woke up in the morning. then I have sent the video to the students, then I have recorded the video, then I have sent the video to the students, then the students saw the video, and then after the video ended, I have taken a live class. But in a non-linear narrative, I am telling you, I have sent the student, I have taken a live class with the students, and the live class was after the video completed. The video I have sent in the morning to the students, okay, after I have recorded it. So I'm telling the last part first, then whatever the story is. So what I did at the last in the chronological order in the linear narrative, that I have taken the live class. In the non-linear narrative, I'm starting to tell the story with the last part, right? That I've taken a live class. It happened in the last, but I'm starting to tell here with that. So this is a non-linear narrative. So whatever is happening in your past or whatever it's happening in your future, if you talk about that, if you don't follow a sequence of events, you can tell a storyline in a non-linear narrative style. All right. So non-linear narratives are used in stories, in films, in animation, a lot of times because it is very, very interesting. These are the 4 factors of non-linear narrative, which is mainly accepted. I mean, the reason for which it is used as a storytelling style. See, linear narrative was very easy. You start with the beginning, you end with in the ending, right? Whatever way the story goes in, I mean, the events are happening, whatever things have happened, you are telling the story in that way. So we have a middle, beginning, middle, and end. But in a non-linear storyline, it does not follow like that, right? In the beginning, you can just tell about what has happened in the end, or at the end you can just go in the flashback and show what actually happened in the beginning. Okay, so why filmmakers or why story writers are following this nonlinear narrative are because of 4 main things. First is it's very interesting, right? Linear narrative is somehow very flat. It's also interesting, you can tell it in an interesting way, but it does not hold that much of excitement as a non-linear narrative can be. Okay, it creates a puzzle that requires more engagement with the individual pieces of the story. So it's like a puzzle, right? You have to, as a viewer or as a reader, you are about to, get a puzzle, because you get a lot of pieces. Eventually, you don't have any connections between them. So in your head, while you're watching the film or while you're reading the story, you are connecting those dots and trying to solve the problem, right? In a linear storyline, what happens? You know what is from starting from the beginning, then you have the problem in the or the conflict in the middle, then you come to the end of the story. So you're traveling with the main character. How the character is traveling in the film, you are traveling with the main character. But in a nonlinear storyline, sometimes you know more than the main character knows, right? That is a way of showing the story. So you know more about what is going to happen than the main character knows. So you get involved in the story in the way that, okay, the character can do this thing, but why is not doing? So like that, it's like creating a puzzle. So, for example, when a novel or when a story opens with the murder, at the beginning, the story, it's written that this person is murdered, right? So the series of events that follows carry greater weight and add to the anticipation of the final outcome. So what's going to happen finally? The story is opening with the murder, right? Then it's showing that how the detective is trying to solve the murder, how he gets to know that there is this murder. So he tries to find the people who have killed, who is the murderer, who are the people linked, all these things. Okay, so this becomes much more interesting for the readers or for the audience. So when the reader knows more about a character's fate than they do, you know that, okay, this detective might solve the problem, but whether he is going in the right way, whether he is catching the right person, because you have been shown or you have been told that this person is murdered by this person at the beginning. Now the detective does not know that, but you know it, right? So the detective is, maybe he is just getting after the wrong guy, right? So you are trying to think that no, no, don't do like that. So you get involved in the story much more. Okay, so that is why it is a very interesting way to tell a story, and to attract the audience in getting more engaged in the story. In if it's a film, to attract the audience to get more engaged in the film, because you are not showing just how the incidents happen one after another. You are showing in a way that you sometimes know more than the characters in the film or in the story does. You know about what happened in the past, you know about what happened in the future, right? Guys, just hold on a minute. I'll just pause this video, mute this video for just 1 minute. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So second thing is, so that is the first thing about making or writing a nonlinear narrative. The second thing is world building. That means try to understand this very, very carefully. If you have any confusion in any part, please write it down during the live class you are going to ask me. Okay, so word building is like, for example, I'm telling my story. Okay, so my life story. So while showing my life story in the film, I have to show what happened in my childhood. So as when I'm showing what happened in my childhood, then my childhood was in the 90s, 1990s. Then I'm showing a world which is 1990s, right? So I'm creating an atmosphere, or I'm creating the set, I'm creating the set design or whatever, that how it looked in 1990, how India looked in 1990, 30 years before, right? So this is a very, very interesting thing in nonlinear narrative, when you are showing different time periods. Okay. Again, if someone is showing what happens in the future, right? The person is showing the present, also what is happening in the future. So he is showing the time, how everything is in the future world, in maybe 2050, right? So this is one very interesting aspect of nonlinear storytelling, when you are showing different time zones or different time periods. You are showing how the world was in the past, you are showing how it is in the present, you're showing what is going to happen in the future. Okay, so taking a momentarily different point of view can give the reader more insight into other aspects of the setting. So there are small subplots or small stories developing into the big story. That is one very, very important thing in nonlinear storytelling or nonlinear narrative, is there is this main story, and most of the time there are small stories inside the main story. Okay, maybe there are 5 main characters in the story. So sometimes uh, one character number 1 is shown. Now sometimes character number 3 is shown, sometimes character number 4 is shown. So you are seeing different character story. Okay, so all these are parallelly happening. Like A very one example of nonlinear storyline is I'm writing a story on the online classes in the fall semester now that is happening between in GDOT. So there are 4 professors who are taking classes in PANU campus. Professor Anurag is taking class 1 now. So at 10:30, class 1 is having a class with Professor Kamal, right? So I'm writing the story of class 1, what is happening at the class at morning 8:30 with Professor Anurag. After that, I'm writing what is happening in the class of class 1 with at morning 9, 8, 10:30 with Professor Kamal, right? At the same time, I can show what is happening in class 2 at 8:30 or at 10:30, right? At the same time, I can show what is happening with class 3 at 10:30. Class 3 might be having a class with uh, Professor Mahadevan, right? So all of you are having different classes at the same time. Class 1 is having class with one faculty, class 2 is having the class with another faculty at the same time. So at the same time, 4 classes are having classes with 4 faculties. So if I am writing a story, at the same time, one after another, I can tell that at 8:30 in the morning, class 1 story, class 2 story, class 3 story, class 4 story. So what class 1 is doing with which faculty? What class 2 is doing with which faculty? What class 3 is doing with which faculty? And what class 4 is doing with which faculty? So 4 classes, 4 faculties, and 4 4 sets of students is doing having the classes at the same time. Here time is at the same. So 8:30 a.m. is the same, right? I am writing a story or at the same time about 4 classes. And all those are parallel stories. Got it? Again, I'm explaining this. If this is a little tough for you to understand, try to understand it properly. If there is any questions, any doubts, please ask me later. So what is happening? One thing is remaining the same. That is the time. I am telling a story about the classes of GDUT, PANU campus, morning classes, 8:30. So at 8:30, what is happening in a classroom? Class 1 is having class with Professor Anurag. Class 2 is having class with Professor Kamal. Class 3 is having class with Professor Mahadevan. Like this, it's happening. So 4 classes is having different classes, different subjects, right? You are learning 3D, concept of storyboarding with me. Class 2 is learning maybe 3D animation with me. Class 3 is learning maybe lighting and rendering, right? All these classes are happening with different teachers, but all the classes are happening at the same time. So when I'm writing the story, I'm writing the story of 4 classes, but all of the classes happening at the same time, right? This is non-linear narrative. I am not writing after class 1 ends, class 2 starts. After class 2 ends, class 3 starts. Okay, 8:30 to 10:30, 10:30 to 11:30, 11:30 to 12:30. What are the classes happening? I am not writing that like that. I am writing at the same time. At 8:30, class 1 is having class with this teacher, class 2 is having classes with this teacher, class 3 is having classes with this teacher, like that. Got it? So in this way, you are telling a number of parallel stories, a number of small stories inside the main story. Okay. Later, I'll be showing some examples. It will be much more clear then. So you are creating 4 different times, 4 different world, 4 different stories inside one single story. So this becomes a very good thing in a non-linear narrative, and the whole story becomes much more clear, much more interesting, and much more meaningful. You know what is happening at the same time everywhere. Okay. So I guess this is clear to you all. If it is not clear, if you have still confusions, please write the question down. Later in the live class, you can ask me the question. The third point is depth of the character. You can learn more about the character because you can be told about his backstory, how the character have evolved. So there is a character who I mean, the story or the film is showing a character who is a soldier who is fighting in the army, right? In a war. So in the beginning of the story, it tells that the soldier is fighting in the war, right? Then it shows what the soldier used to be in his childhood, how the soldier became a soldier, okay, how he got into the academy, how he got into the army, right? How he is going to fight a war. So now you know more about this character. Okay, you know in the beginning that now he is fighting for his life in a war, in a battle. But you now know that before this battle, before this war, what he was doing, how he came to this position. Okay, so you know a lot of things about the character and you understand them. You can know them, that how the choices they have made or what they are doing in the story, why they are behaving like this. So you get a lot of ideas about the character. The character becomes much more clear to you. And in this way, you can create a complex character. You know, I think all of you know about the Batman character, right? A Batman is a character who fights crime in a bat suit, right? But when you are showing that how he became a Batman, his parents were killed in his childhood when he was very small, only 10 years old. His parents were killed in front of his eyes. So he took a vow, he promised himself that he is going to fight crime. So when you know about this, you know why he became became a character like Batman, right? If you do not know this backstory, then you might have a question. Oh, then why this person has become Batman? Or you have seen Superman character, right? A person who is flying, who has this super strength, who is extremely powerful. But if you don't know the backstory, that Superman came from another planet. Okay, he is basically an alien. He came here when he was in world when he was a child. Then he was brought up by two people, I mean one couple, right? Then he had these values as a human being. He's like a human being by nature, but he is this very powerful superhero. Got it? So once you know the backstory, you know that you know your character much better. Okay, so apart from being an interesting, or you are showing different times, you are showing different places at the same time in your story, you can get a lot of ideas about the main character in the story, so it becomes much more interesting. The fourth point is the flow. So the flow of the story is not as simple as a linear narrative. It does not begin in some point, it does not end in some point. It goes in a very complex way. So readers find it's more, they can think a lot. Okay. So if you're playing a game, there are games which are having non-linear narrative style. So when you're playing a game, you know that if you go this way, you are going to a different story. If you are going this way, you are going to a different story. So you have a lot of things to choose. You have a lot of possibilities with you. It's not that there is only one single road to work. There are 4 or 5 roads. In whatever way the story is going, you are finding more different things to think, and you get involved with the story much more. So the flow in a non-linear narrative is much more complex than a linear narrative. Linear narrative is a very simple flow. Non-linear narrative, it's much more complex, right? That's why it's much more interesting. So these are the 4 factors of non-linear narrative storytelling. Okay, interesting, being the story being interesting. It's like creating a puzzle, and the viewers or the readers are just trying to solve the puzzle, right? It's world building. You can see different time zones, you can see different time periods in your story at the same time. So when you are talking about the past, you get a different time, you can see a different setting. When you talk about the future, you can see a different setting, right? And there are a lot of subplots, small stories inside the main story. So the main story can be one single story. Inside that, there can be a lot of small subplots. Depth of the character, you can know the character much well, right? So you can know about the character's backstory, why the character has become what the character is now. Okay, so you can understand the character's choices much better, and a complex flow in the story that makes the story much more interesting. Okay, so remember these 4 factors, are of non-linear narrative, and that is why a lot of filmmakers and a lot of story writers write their stories in a non-linear narrative style because of this. So how do you tell a non-linear narrative? As you can see, it's not as simple as a linear narrative style. How do you tell it's a non-linear narrative? You can jump in time. Like I said, you speak about what happened tomorrow, or you can speak about what happened yesterday, right? You don't have to follow a single straight timeline. So you can go in the past, you can go in the present, right? Of course, there should be a common thread, a common link among all the parts attached to the main characters. Okay, but you can show it. You can show what you can start with the characters end, whatever it's at the end of the story in the beginning, right? Then you can show what happened before all the things happened, and then you can show how the characters are doing whatever they are doing, right? So there can be a break in the chronology, okay, and you can write the story in some events in the future, some events in the past, but there must be a common link among all those, and that's it. That should be strongly attached with the main characters. No part should be separate. There should be a common link between all the parts. The second point is it can be a flashback. So you are telling the story what happened in your past. So the whole story can be a flashback. So the character might be telling what has happened and how is the character is at the present condition, right? So I can tell my story like in 2014, I have joined VIT, then I have taken 4 or 5 subjects, then other faculties came in, then I used to take only 2 subjects, then I got this assignment to teach in China every semester from 2015. I first visited in China in 2015 September. Till from then, every year I have been visiting China. But in 2020, there is this pandemic situation, which is why we have to take online classes. And in 2021 also, we are taking online classes. So I have told whatever have happened in my past in a flashback, right? So you can tell a non-linear narrative story like that. Dream sequence, very interesting. It can be the story is about a dream, or your imagining something, and the story can be like that. So if you are talking about a dream, you are talking it that you have seen, that after you have woken up, after you woke up from your sleep, you are speaking about the dream. So you are talking about what happened in the past, right? When you were sleeping, you were seeing the dream, and after the dream happened, you have now woke up, and you have woke up from the sleep, and you are now telling about your dream. So this is like also a nonlinear storytelling. And the dream itself has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if I have dreamt that today I have dreamt about I went to the moon, I was going with in a spaceship, then I went to the moon, and there I met some aliens who tried to kill me, but I fought back with the aliens, and then I finally killed the aliens, and then I came back to the earth. So this may be my dream. Okay. Now this has a beginning, middle, end, right? And I am telling you this dream. This is a story. This also has this is also a story. So it's a story inside a story, right? The story is, please sit. I am now going to tell. I have seen today. I was sleeping and I saw a very interesting dream, right? So this is my story. In the story, I am telling what I have seen in my dream. So my dream is also one story, that I have gone to the moon and there were already aliens and I was fighting the aliens and I came back after winning over, right? So that's a story. So this is a story inside another story. Okay. So this can be also a non-linear narrative, and there are very interesting stories and films where this dream sequence they have shown or they have worked with. And mainly is whatever style you adopt to tell a nonlinear narrative, the main thing is you have to keep your story organized in order to link different parts of the story strongly together. Okay, because there are a lot of small pockets, small parts in your story. If you are not following them or if you are not linking them properly, then it might feel very out of the place, right? So everything in your non-linear story line should be linked very properly. All right. So this is how you can tell a non-linear narrative. You can ask, I mean, you can write in a flashback style, you can write in a dream sequence style, you can have a non-linear timing. For example, you are talking about the future, then you're talking about the present, then you're talking about the past, like that, right? You don't have to follow a single time sequence. Sequence means when one thing happen after one other, right? This is sequence. So when I'm teaching here, you can see slide number 23. Then after this, I am going straight to slide number 20. Then I'm teaching slide number 22. Then I'm teaching slide number 16. When I'm teaching like that, this is a non-linear storyline. When I'm teaching 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, this is a linear storyline, right? So I can be very interesting in speaking whatever you're going to learn later. Then I can speak whatever we are going to learn now. So this can be a non-linear narrative. So if I draw it in a picture, it can be like this. So the first thing is here, then it goes to here. From the second picture, it can go in three different ways. Okay. One character is shown over here, another character is shown over here, and in the middle, one character is going. From the upper picture, you can see the arrow going into another character. From the lower picture, you can see the arrow going into another character, right? Another story that is happening. From the middle, two settings, it's going towards two settings. This is just an example, right? So at the same time, you have at first, three incidents, three stories happening at the same time. Then you have From those 3, 4 stories happening at the same time. So all these are linked together at the end. Got it? At the end, everything is linked together, because or else it will have 4 different endings. It will not be linked together. So it can start from one point into another. From that point, it can move into 3 parts or 4 parts, 5 parts, how many ever it can be. From here, each part can again move into different parts. So the first part here can move into one story. The middle part here can move into 2 different stories. The lower part can be moving into another different story. Okay, but all of them has to move into, at the end of the story, it has to come into one single point. Got it? So this is a basic structure of a non-linear storyline, where there are parallel plots, parallel stories, flashbacks. Sometimes it can go back. So for example, this one, the upper picture, this is a non-linear narrative. So you have known the linear narrative style, right? There is a beginning, then there is some events, exposition, whatever it's happening, then it's going in a straight line until the end. Non-linear storyline, it is a beginning, the event can be in the beginning, then it is going in the middle, it is moving, then again it is coming back in the flashback, maybe. Okay, from the flashback, it's going directly to the end, towards the climax. So this is a non-linear storyline. So how you are telling the story, in which manner, in which pattern, that is very, very important in non-linear storyline. Linear storyline is a very simple way. It has a proper beginning, middle, end. Whenever you start telling something, you continue doing that and comes to the end. Non-linear storytelling, when you're beginning telling something, it can move forward. Again, it can come back, show something that have happened in the past, then again move forward to the future. Right? So this way, a non-linear storyline can go on. So I am going to show an example. So I guess you have all seen this film, Iron Man Part 2. So what happens in Iron Man Part 2? It begins with a backstory, right? It begins with a backstory. Then it it shows the story of this character's father, his link with his father, right? Then it moves forward, right? It then shows whatever have happened with this character in one way. In one place, it is showing whatever have happened with the villain character, right? At the same time, it is showing whatever have happened. So here it comes 6 months later. So at the same time, it shows whatever have happened with Iron Man character, right? So there are different parts. It is not following a straight line. It is following somewhere it is showing at the whatever it's happening in the before Iron Man became Iron Man, right? Then again, it's showing at the same time 2 different characters doing something differently, right? Then it is showing whatever it's happening with this character. So same time, different storylines. I guess all of you have seen this film. If you have not, you can see this film, and you can follow the characters, understanding the characters' movement more interestingly. Got it? So even in the middle, when they show this character, when he captures this character talks about whatever happened in the past. So in a single story, there are small stories or sub stories where they are showing each character's different activities that is happening at the same time, right? So this is one example of nonlinear storytelling. Another very intelligent example can be Iron Man 3. This is much more a nonlinear storytelling because it begins basically. See, if you have not seen the film, you can see the film later. Iron Man 3, it begins basically, sorry, network is not playing the movie properly. Yeah, it's not playing. But anyways, it begins basically with the Iron Man character talking about whatever happened in his future, right? Yeah, I can share it now. Just wait a minute. So he is beginning the film when he is talking about whatever happens at the past, right? So this is a scene. So observe over here. This is a scene that happened much later in the film, right? This is a scene that happened much later in the film. When we see the film, then we get to know that what happened later. But this is shown in the beginning, right? Then he is talking about whatever have happened in his past. This is much before he became an Iron Man, right? This happened much before he became an Iron Man. Then here it comes at, it shows, I'm coming to the correct part. Yeah, it shows present day. So they have shown a flashback. Now it comes to the present day, right? So that's the non-linear storytelling. So now everything is happening in the present day. So some part, mainly in a film, there are non-linear storytelling, there are linear storytelling mixed together. Okay. So something is happening here in a parallel storytelling with these two characters at the same time. Tony Stark is with this kid in a different place, right? So two stories, two incidents are happening at the same time, but in different places. That's again a non-linear storytelling. It is not following one single character throughout the story. It is following different characters doing different things in different parts of the places, right? So yeah, so at the end of everything, if you remember, the last post credit scene in the film, okay, the last post credit scene will come just in a while. I guess while you're watching Marvel movies, you are always waiting for the last post credit scene, right? Because they're very much interesting. So at the last post credit scene, here it shows that Tony Stark is talking with Dr. Banner, who is the Hulk, right? They are talking, both talking, and Tony Iron Man was narrating this event. So the whole thing, whole film was his narration to this other character, right? So the whole film was a flashback because he is telling this whole story that whatever have happened, right? So overall, it's a non-linear style of storytelling. These are more simple stories in non-linear style. I don't know whether you have watched one movie called Interstellar. This is a film you can watch, which is a complete non-linear storytelling, or another movie called Inception. Okay, this is a one film which also talks about a film which is called, which is in a non-linear storytelling. Another film, Memento, a very famous film, and this is also a very good example, one of the best example in a non-linear storytelling. Okay, it's very interesting, um, this non-linear storytelling style, and many um filmmakers, many story writers have used these storytelling techniques to tell their stories. So overall, again, I'll just recapitulate again whatever we have learned. So we have learned about nonlinear storytelling, a storytelling style that do not follow the chronological order of events. That means it does not talk about events that have happened in a sequence, one after the other. It talks about events that can be from the future, that can be from the past, all together in one single plot, one single story. Okay, four major factors of nonlinear narrative, which is very interesting. That is, first one is it's a very interesting storytelling because it's like creating a puzzle, right? You know a lot of things from before, you know a lot of things from after. So, sometimes you know more than the major character knows, because you can start with whatever have happened in the past or future, right? So next is world building. You have different time zones. So sometimes you're showing the past world, sometimes you're showing the future time, sometimes you're showing the present time. So because of different time periods, you have a much more interesting way of showing the story. You can see the character's backstory, right? So you can see the depth in the character, right? And you understand the character much better. You can know why the character is doing like this, right? When you have seen the past, or when you have seen the backstory of the character. The flow is a very complex flow in the story. So sometimes it is not boring in any way, it is not flat. Sometimes it is going up, down. There are different stories, subplots, different small stories inside one single big story. So you have a lot of interesting things going on. How do you tell a nonlinear narrative? You can write a story with different times. So some events can be in the future, some event can be in the past, but there must be a one single common link between all the parts with the characters. But it can be, sometimes it can be going into the beginning, it can be going, sometimes the whole thing can start with the ending, right? Flashback, you can tell the story in your flashback, that like, just I have shown the example of Iron Man Part 3, where the whole story, the whole film was in flashback, because at the end it was shown that Tony Stark was telling this story to the Hulk, to Bruce Banner, right? So he was just telling the story in a flashback. Whatever have happened in the past, he was telling the whole thing. Dream sequence, you can just talk about a dream, whatever have happened in your dream. So the dream has a different story, and it's a story that you are telling the dream. So you're telling the dream after you have woke up from your sleep. So you're talking about your flashback. And in the dream, that is a different story. So you have a small story, or you have a story inside another story. And whatever the style is, you have to keep organized your link, your what different links, so that it becomes a strong story together. Like this link this picture has at the last. So one picture, one part is going to another part. One single part can go into three different parts, right? One part can move into another part, one can in a different path. So all these parts can move into different parts. But all of these should be linked together in the end, or at the climax. It should be linked together so we can understand whatever is happening inside the whole story. If it is not linked together, we will have a lot of confusion that what is going to happen or what has happened. Okay, then it will not be a very good story. And this is the linear narrative, where you have a proper beginning, then you have a lot of events, then it comes to an end, a very chronological order storytelling. In the nonlinear narrative, it's not chronological order. You have a beginning, it can move to the middle, it can again come back to the beginning, right? And it can jump into the end, right? So it's all about how you are telling the story. So this can be much more complex, yet it can be much more interesting. Okay. So this, yeah, I guess non-linear narrative basic idea is clear to you. Again, I request all of you that if there is any question in your mind regarding nonlinear narrative, it's a little bit complex one to understand. So if there is any question, you please ask me during the live class now. Okay. After this video ends, I will share with you another video, that's a small one, but that will describe the nonlinear storytelling a little bit more. So after that video ends, we are going to have the live class. Okay, so that's a 10 minutes video. So after that ends, we are going to have the live class. So see you all in the live class. See the video carefully. If anyone have any question, kindly ask me during the live class. Okay. Bye guys. Bye everyone.
Hi, my name is Walid Badur, and my question is, when you try to tell a non-linear story, like Pulp Fiction or Swordfish, how do you do that? Like, you first do it in a linear way and then start changing it for the final draft, or you start from the beginning as a non-linear story?
No, I can't imagine starting it as a non-linear story. It seems to me that in these multi-plot, I think when you say non-linear, you're not quite using that term the way I would use it. A truly non-linear story would be something like Bad Timing, where the scenes and the events are so tossed like a salad that after the film, you could not sort out beginning, middle, and end. Flashbacks, for example, in a fine film like Reversal of Fortune, go back and forth in time, but by the end of the film, you could the audience could, if they wanted to, go back and put the whole story together in order. Okay, so flashbacks going in and out of time don't necessarily make it non-linear. I think what you're really talking about when you use an example like Pulp Fiction is multi-plot stories. Multi-plot stories weave between storylines. And that weave, in that sense, is non-linear because you have a number of stories and they start, pick up, break off, and then pick up again through through the film overall. So I would imagine that if you were doing something like Love Actually or Crash, the only way to really get all of this straight would be somehow you have various protagonists and they have their own storylines, and you would work those storylines in a linear way, one at a time, saying this story takes him to this, starts here and ends there. This story does this, and this story does that. To have those stories separately, and then figure out a way to go from one to the other and cross-cut between these various storylines to create the fabric of the film. But I know this in terms of film. This is not true of the novel necessarily at all, but it would be true of film. That cross-cutting, that weave is ultimately done in post-production. The writers write take a film like Parenthood. Babaloo Mandel and his partner wrote a number of stories involving parenting. These stories had characters who moved from one story to another. They wrote it as best they could. It was shot and produced as best it could. But then finally, it was the editor and the director working together somehow that made the choices how to get from this story to that story. And finally, in post-production, the weave was really put together, cuts were made, transitions were created, and so forth. And so that you as the writer create the stories, you create the initial weave, but ultimately it's in production and post-production that the final decisions will be made exactly how these stories weave together. And I am also certain that in every one of these cases, it's different. It may be that the way Tarantino wrote Pulp Fiction is exactly the way it was shot, and the editing simply fulfilled the writing one-to-one. It could be that in something like Love Actually, they had no idea how these stories would weave together. They shot them all independently and then sat there in the editing room and went crazy for some months trying to figure out how to piece these things in a way that works. I really can't tell you. I really don't know. And so I think initially you have to work these stories out individually, and then you have to find your weave, present that, and the director will do it again their way, and then the editor will ultimately make the final cuts.
You don't know who you are.
I'm Leonard Shelby. I'm from San Francisco.
That's who you were. That's not what you become.
Hello, my name is Aaron, and today I would like to talk about nonlinear storytelling. First, we have to ask the question, what is nonlinear storytelling? Nonlinear storytelling is described as events in a particular story occurring out of chronological order, such as parallel plot lines being told at the same time, dream emergence, narrating another story within a main plot line,
She must help me rid ourselves of Angier.
and jumps in time.
I started shooting, so I blasted my way out of there.
However, the technique of simply jumping in time does not necessarily constitute a nonlinear story, such as in the film Boyhood. In the story, we see a young boy named Mason grow up and eventually reach young adulthood. The director, Richard Linklater, tells this story through the use of jumps in time, sometimes several years into the future. But this example of jumping in time is linear since it is always a result of progressing the story further into the future. Now that we've covered a basic concept of nonlinear storytelling, let's talk about perhaps the leading mind behind nonlinear narrative structure in the industry, Christopher Nolan. While not all of his films employ the use of nonlinear storytelling, a majority of them do, arguably the most popular being his most recent film to date, Interstellar, a film consisting of many concepts, one of which is the idea of time and specifically time travel. However, I would like to focus our attention on a film of his which some have not heard of, a lot of which know about, and very few have seen, Memento.
Teddy, don't believe his lies. He is the one. Kill him.
Memento is probably the most prime example of a nonlinear story told on the screen that I've ever seen, which is saying something considering how many movies I've watched. The plot to Memento is rather simple. It's all about a guy named Leonard with short-term memory loss trying to figure out who killed his wife. There's just one thing. Every scene in the film involving the main plot line is played in non-chronological order. That means you get to watch the quote-unquote ending of the story first and the beginning of the story last. The twist here is not really in the narrative of the film, but actually in how the narrative is displayed. By allowing the audience to see the ending of the story first, the question doesn't become who is the killer, but rather how did we end up here? Unlike most linear stories, the mystery that unfolds is not how does it end, but where does it begin? To the credit of Nolan's genius, the question of where does it begin actually becomes the question of how does it end. No! On top of all that, between the intercutting of each scene, we are also getting a black and white story of Leonard talking on the phone with someone, telling them about a character named Sammy who has a similar condition to his own. The black and white scenes are clearly flashbacks, but unlike the main story being told, these scenes are told in chronological order. The parallel cutting between this story and the main story gives us a greater understanding of Leonard's condition and provides us with more information of the main plot at the same time.
She really thought she'd call his bluff.
Ouch.
The beauty of Nolan's direction here is that by the end of the film, the main story being told in reverse order and this flashback subplot eventually meet up to give us the ending of the film, or the beginning depending on which way you look at it. Whether the film Memento is brilliant due to Jonathan Nolan's excellent screenplay,
What are you talking about? These tracks are only a few days old.
Tracks? What are you, Pocahontas?
or Christopher's brilliant direction, or both, the cutting together of this intricate story is a great example of how nonlinear storytelling can be extremely effective. However, not all films that use nonlinear narrative structure use it wisely. Take the film The Captive, for example. This independent film, directed by Anton Migoyan, is about a girl who is abducted at a young age and held captive for years by a strange man while her father desperately searches for her. The film opens with the present day as the girl Cassandra is locked away, now a teenager. We also see the parents, Matthew and Tina, are separated, still mourning the disappearance of their daughter. It's not long before the story jumps back in time to the day of the kidnapping, where Cassandra is young and full of joy. As the story progresses, we keep jumping back and forth in time to see what the present is holding for the characters involved, and the past to see the journey the characters took to reach the point they are at now. The problem is that the jumps are unclear to the audience, leaving us in confusion about the current period of time until we are informed through a line of dialogue or an action halfway into the scene. The transitions happen so fast and with no visual or audio cues that the audience is left to wonder before they're even given a chance to figure it out. In contrast, Nolan uses visual cues in Memento to link each continuation of the non-chronological scenes in order to keep the construct clear and understandable.
I should kill you.
Meanwhile, the rest of The Captive is equally as confusing as its opening scenes, as the narrative jumps from the past to the future and back to the past again, without giving the audience any cues to the jumps. Whether this is on purpose or not, this is just bad storytelling using a nonlinear structure. Director Quentin Tarantino, on the other hand, is another filmmaker like Nolan who uses nonlinear storytelling to his advantage, at least in his earlier films such as Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. Like Nolan in Memento, Tarantino uses flashback and parallel storytelling in the film Reservoir Dogs to tell the story of how these men ended up in the situation they are in. By allowing us to see the present first and witnessing the hectic nature of a man losing blood from a bullet wound and the others discussing the current situation they are in, Tarantino lets us cut back to the beginning of the story through each character's narrative arc. He uses nonlinear storytelling to simultaneously give us information on the here and now and the then and there. And he does this in an elegant way that doesn't confuse the audience by using, you guessed it, visual cues. To wrap it all up, whether it's Nolan using this nonlinear technique in movies like The Prestige, where a character reads the journal of another character and a story within a story unfolds, or it's Tarantino using it in Pulp Fiction as a character dies halfway through the story and then reappears for the last portion of the film in an extended flashback, nonlinear storytelling has been used for years. Some directors, like Nolan, are experts at this form of narrative, and other directors not so much. In any case, whether you use nonlinear storytelling or not, all depends on whether your story calls for this technique and how well you can visually construct it in your particular story. Nonlinear narrative can be complicated, but if you do it right, using visual or audio cues, your audience won't be left in the dark. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now, where was I?